We've got on board with us Vinati Organics management joining in the upswing in domestic inquiries because of the China slowdown. Indian pharma companies as well looking to cut independence or dependence on China rather, and Indian companies looking at higher margin value-added products. Lots of discussion points. Joining us right now, Vinati Saraf Mutreja, the MD and CEO at Vinati Organics on the show right now. Vinati, hi, good morning. Good to have you on the show. Vinati, the consensus clearly seems to be pointing towards specialty chemicals from the investment fraternity, and clearly the market as well is assigning a premium valuation to just about each and every chemical name. For the next 10 years, what according to you could be the future of Indian specialty chemicals now that there seems to be relatively lesser of a focus on dependence on China, and that really seems to be the main goal?
Hi, Aisha. Good morning. Thanks for having me. No, I think definitely the next decade, if I could say so without sounding overly optimistic, will be a golden one for the Indian specialty chemical industry. Now, of course, it's subject to a few things. First and foremost, the industry will need a lot of support from the government in terms of providing better infrastructure, better feedstock availability, as well as better export incentives, if one may say so. For example, the government has just announced a $1 billion plus package for the Indian pharmaceutical industry. Now, one has to realize that the chemical industry is a building block for most industries, whether it is pharmaceuticals, whether it is automobiles, water treatment, any industry. And that is the industry. If we can provide incentives or stimulus to the building block, only then can the pharma industry, for example, flourish, right? Just to give you an example, about 70% of the raw materials for pharmaceuticals still come from China. And these raw materials are what? They are chemicals, right? So India can also make these chemicals ourselves. Now, secondly, the general shift from China to India has been happening over the last couple of years, especially in our industry, due to many factors. Of course, the US-China trade war is one. Generally, the cost of labor is still much lower in India as compared to China. China is sort of moving away from manufacturing chemicals and moving more towards IT, data, and a little more service-oriented industries. Also, there has been a strict environment crackdown in China over the last 2 years. So we've been seeing this positive shift towards India for the last few years, and going forward, it's only here to stay. It's again a combination of what the government does, and of course, the industry leaders, the industry itself. We have to get our act together and focus on improving efficiencies, increasing our capacities, and just getting into more new products.
What has been the impact of this entire change of manufacturing or supply chain in China? We understand Apple is looking at increasing their stake. I was reading it in our sister paper Economic Times 2 days ago that a German shoemaker is looking at manufacturing their base from China to India. Are you getting a sense that a lot of manufacturing and supply facility will start moving to China? A, world is averse to buy from China. B, suddenly in India, corporate tax is low. Land reforms and labor reforms now soon will see light of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it necessarily anti-China, but it's also people are looking at diversifying their supply chain, right? And since so far a lot of the supplies, a lot of the basic materials, like you mentioned, for shoe exports, textiles were coming from China, people are looking at diversification. Now, if you see after the US-China trade war, China lost about 9% of its exports, but the bulk of that market share was grabbed by countries like Mexico, Vietnam, Thailand. India just got about 1%. So India being a much larger country, given our demographics, like you pointed out, we've got now the tax cuts, land reforms, labor reforms. Going forward, we are in a position to grab a greater share of China's lost business.
Okay, Vinati, has the company been able to function efficiently during the lockdown? Like, what's the kind of utilization that you're seeing at the main facilities? and measures that you're taking to ensure business continuity?
Yeah, so for our company and for a lot of other chemical companies, it is relatively easier to get the essential services permit because, like I mentioned, chemicals go into various sectors like personal care, water treatment, agriculture. The bigger challenge was getting the labor. Now, luckily for us, in both our factories, most of our labor is local or within district, and they hadn't moved out. So we didn't face a lot of issue on the labor front, and we've been running at good. One factory is running at 100% capacity. The second one's running at 70 to 80%. But a lot of chemical companies, especially that had labor that has moved now again to UP, Bihar, they are facing issues on that front and hence are unable to run at the required capacities even though the demand is there for their products.
Just trying to understand a little bit more, when you talk about intermediates, formulations, the novel patented products, toll manufacturing, or for that matter, even CRAMS, where, according to you, would India find leadership amidst a time like when you're talking about there is a clear shift from China to India now in the next, say, 5 years?
See, CRAMS is relatively easy. What CRAMS essentially means is the customers come to you, they give you the process, they give you the technology, and you have to make the investment, and they give you a fixed return on the investment, and you produce that product for them. So that has been how even the Indian pharma industry has sort of structured itself in some sense. Chemicals have also done that. There have been CRAMS instances in agrochemicals and flavors and fragrances. Now, where in the Indian chemical industry has lacked is in innovation or the emphasis on spending on R&D or coming up with our own processes or our own innovation. That is where if we give a push, you get better margins there. There are a lot more products that we can get into if our focus if we change our mindset to a more R&D oriented mindset.
Fair point. Can you explain to us that on the chemical front, prices have been volatile, whether it is crude or other intermediaries or ethyl or the ether? I mean, everything in chemical has been very volatile. Where will price actually stabilize? Crude at 0 was unthinkable and unsustainable. Similarly, crude at 35 looks like the world is normalizing. In the chemical complex where you deal, where do you think pricing trends are moving and where do you think things will settle now?
Frankly, predicting on crude is definitely, I'm no expert, and I would not even try predicting where crude price will settle. In my career over the last 14 years, I have seen crude move from $60 to $100 and $140 to 0 to $35. So very, very hard to predict that. All I can say is where we have been lucky is that most of our pricing is formula-linked pricing. So the fluctuation, our raw material prices do move in line with crude prices, but these fluctuations don't affect our margins because we are able to pass through to for our final sales price as well.
So, Vinati, what is it that you can give us by way of visibility when it comes to your business? What kind of demand outlook are you getting from customers for the remainder of the year? Will lower margins, recently launched products now start to grab a larger share of your revenue pie? And what exactly happens to your margins? Are you seeing any uptick in prices because of the lack of suppliers, or for that matter, even worse, as demand has now dropped significantly in key markets?
See, for us, on the demand front, we are relatively insulated. one of our products, IBB, goes into ibuprofen, which is the world's most common fever reducer or pain relieving drug. And in fact, over the last 4 to 5 months, ibuprofen demand has increased by about 25%. So demand-wise on that business, we are fine. Coming to ATBS, ATBS finds applications in water treatment, personal care also. It's used to make ECG gels. It finds application in textiles, construction chemicals, mining, automobiles. So on the whole, even that's quite diversified. Even though there is some slowdown in the uptake from the oil and gas sector, it's made up by other sectors like agriculture. Isobutene, for example, is used in a pesticide. So the next 2 quarters, one can say, would be in line with our previous 2 quarters. Coming to the new products, butyl phenols. Now, there has been a delay because the shortage in labor, obviously what happens is you concentrate the labor, the available force to make your existing products, and the new projects, the new products, that takes a back seat. So growth wise for the whole year, we would probably revise our growth estimate maybe from 25% to 15%. But on the whole, in the long run, if you take a 3-year outlook or a 5-year outlook, we are very much on track.
Sure. Vinati, just one last question, because, backward integration clearly seems to be the big trend which is emerging. Companies do not want to depend on China for anything. They want to make everything in-house, or for that matter, even for raw materials. What is your company's philosophy here, and how geared up are you to adopt backward integration, if at all you're thinking along those lines?
So most of our raw materials are bulk commodity chemicals such as toluene, propylene, NTB, which are coming from refineries such as Reliance, IOC, BPCL, or are imported in large quantities into the country. So it's really not our forte to backward integrate into these chemicals. Now, what's positive for us is we are not importing them from China. So we are hardly, in fact, importing them, even though there's import available. If at all, we are mostly sourcing it locally. We have long-term supply contracts with our suppliers. So raw material availability or supply chain disruption has not been an issue for our company.
Okay, Vinati, good to chat with you, and thanks very much for answering all our questions that candidly. Good speaking with you.
Thank you.